While Congress grapples with the best way to investigate the January 6th Capitol riot, state legislators around the country have already begun attempting to weed out extremism within the ranks of law enforcement. But like those lawmakers on Capitol Hill, they're facing strong opposition to the proposals. It ranges from strict partisan division to questions about the constitutionality of some of the measures. From the New York Times reporting on this, quote, various such efforts have been simmering around the country for years, spurred by FBI reports starting more than 15 years ago that document a concerted effort by white supremacist and other extremist organizations to infiltrate the police. But even with the memory of January 6th looming large, the roadblocks have been tough to overcome. From the Times, police officers, like everyone else, enjoy First Amendment rights to free speech and free assembly. So the challenge for lawmakers is figuring out how to preserve those rights while barring extremists from infiltrating the ranks. Joining our conversation, former FBI Special Agent Clint Watts, an MSNBC national security analyst and distinguished research fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute, someone we turn to for all these conversations. I want to read this scenario in the New York Times because it gives you sort of a practical understanding of how tricky this is, and then we'll talk it through. The Times gives an example from Fresno, California, that says last month a police officer in Fresno, California was fired after videos surfaced that showed him supporting the Proud Boys at a protest. Such ideology, behavior, and affiliations have no place in law enforcement and will not be tolerated within the ranks of the Fresno Police Department. That was what the police chief said. Yet when lawmakers in the state recently proposed legislation to give police departments more power to weed out officers with extremist ties, they met resistance. Brian Marvel, the president of the Peace Officers Research Association of California, said in a statement that the organization supported the idea, but not the legislation that was drafted. It would, quote, infringe on a person's individual rights, he said, and possibly prevent someone from becoming an officer based on personal beliefs, religion, or other interests. So if videos that show a candidate to be a police officer or a current police officer with the Proud Boys at a protest, if that's not enough to show the association with one of the extremist groups, what is? How does this happen?
Nicole, it's really two parts. One is the breakdown of what is a domestic terrorist organization. It frustrates just about everything that we have going on in the country in terms of our law enforcement posture, what we saw going into January 6th. Can the FBI watch what's going on social media or not? We don't know which are the extremist groups are allowed to watch. What is private versus what is public continues in that debate. And I can just tell you, Nicole, I for probably 15 years, have taught different law enforcement crowds on countering violent extremism. And by 2018, 2017 even, started to get weird because the breakdown really came on international versus domestic. It was very clear domestic extremism was rising. They wanted classes to be taught, but you literally could not get into them too far because there was a divergence on what extremist groups should be policed, even in those classrooms. And that really comes down to Donald Trump's ability to politicize law enforcement in this country. It was very clear, one of the classes I taught was all across the country would send reps into one class. It was a great course, and they were all officers essentially from different jurisdictions. They're brought in to integrate with each other and work with each other. But who they called an extremist depended on where they were in the country and what information they listened to. And that really came down to the president's rhetoric around Antifa. And I think that's where the problem is today, is how would you fairly and judiciously do that around the country? And I would also say that local, state, and city municipalities are pretty good at policing their ranks over time. I think they do a pretty good job. But in some of the sheriff's departments where we have what we call the lone sheriffs that are in support of Donald Trump and don't recognize Joe Biden as the president, there's a significant problem. If you were to stumble into that part of the country, they may not work with the FBI, or they may not be trusting with the FBI. They may not want to enforce the law as it is designated by state and locals. And I think that's where we get into some real serious problems about law enforcement reform in this country.
And obviously, Donald Trump, by telling the Proud Boys to stand back and stand by, made him not just part of their coalition, but part of his, sort of offensive structure, if you will. He gave them an order. I wonder how long it takes to purge that structure from the sort of permission structure of the militias and the white supremacists and the brazenness with which they may go about defending their associations?
It's going to be extremely challenging, Nicole. The only thing we have going to our advantage right now is the investigations of January 6th have given the federal law enforcement agencies like the FBI and even some state and local groups the actual evidence needed to go ahead and push that agenda forward, meaning these people are involved in a crime or supporting a crime. And so that gives you some leads into where you can look. But across the board, when you look around the country, it was almost routine in the last few years to see law enforcement officers showing up with 3% patches or some sort of Proud Boy video or QAnon patches at different times in terms of conspiracy groups. That was really about allegiance, political allegiance, and how that was blending with law enforcement. And I think in some parts of the country, particularly those where Donald Trump has lots of support, it's going to be very difficult to police that out of the ranks anytime soon.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.